This is one of the ways that the community has really opened up my eyes, what accessibility means. When you're handling digital products, you could be excluding so many people, and they could be making all the wrong decisions, whether financial or operational in any way as a result. So while you might be building for the majority, that does not mean you should be excluding the minority.
Welcome to Power Platform Connections, where we highlight and feature the amazing community members such as yourself doing amazing things like blogs, articles, and videos all throughout our community. My name is David Warner. I'm a community program manager for Microsoft, and with me, my co-host.
I'm Hugo Bernier. I'm a program manager at Microsoft. And today, our guest is a change manager. She's a speaker. She has been focusing on user experience, which we definitely have to talk about later. But she's also a newly minted Microsoft MVP, Angeliki Patsiavou. Angeliki, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Super excited.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us on the show today. We're really excited too. And obviously, as Hugo had said, congratulations on the MVP. Very well deserved. Very excited that we saw that coming out. Yeah. Why don't you take a minute and tell the community a little bit about yourself?
So I'm a change manager. I work with Avanade, and I'm also a human evangelist in the community. You might wonder, what is a human evangelist? There's only tech evangelist. So it's a bit of a coin term, and I essentially am very passionate about the human impact of all the fantastic technology that we have out there and how we can really revolutionize and democratize IT in our own way, as well as the deep, meaningful impact we can have through digital transformation. So I'm quite active within the business application space, speaking about how to build applications that make impact, how to have fusion teams come together to do it, user experience, all sorts of things, and change management as a foundational methodology. And on the other hand, on a more personal note, I'm also a martial artist and a singer, so you'll see me in a few different hats.
First and foremost, you filled out the form that tells us a little bit about you so we can share that with the community. You know, it's funny. This seems to come up never on a show, which is food. Food never gets mentioned on this show, but you had mentioned that
we mentioned that. Yeah,
I think so too. Hugo, did you have something to do with food? Have you ever? No? Yeah? Yes? No, yeah. Anyways, your favorite food, chocolate. So I figured you said that you've been cursed with a bit of a sweet tooth. So tell us, like, what is your favorite? Like, what is the ultimate favorite chocolate item? Because usually food, when people say food, they're thinking bigger, not just a single individual, like, you know,
I know.
chocolate.
You know what? I just had to be honest. I have the biggest sweet tooth. I think I could probably survive with that actual savory food and just survive on that. I mean, survive is probably not the right word considering. I wouldn't necessarily say I have a specific one. I love every kind of different facet of it. But maybe if I absolutely have to choose, like fresh ice cream, I'm half Italian. Fresh gelato is like one of the best things you can have. So whenever I go back to my hometown, just savoring that fresh gelato over a brioche, which is like a local delicacy where I'm from, it's just the best thing, especially in the summer.
Do you like to cook, by the way? Or is it just like to consume the cooking?
I do, yes, I do. I don't have as much time, but at the same time, when I do get to it, I love doing it. I find it very peaceful, a good way to distress and kind of switch off. And also, I'm a bit of a rebel. I never follow recipes. I just go in and, as Thai people say, because I did a cooking class in Thailand back in the day, just cook with your feelings. Sprinkle, you know, a bit of joy with all the different spices and see what happens. So I'm a bit of a rebel when I do get to it.
I'm not sure how I feel about kind of never following the recipe because, you know, as a chef, yeah, you're definitely, you want to innovate, you want to come up with new recipes, but once you figured out that recipe, you want to make sure that that recipe is consistent all the time, right? You don't want a customer to come in to a restaurant and one time they have it and it tastes great, the other time it just tastes different. So I feel both. I'm ambivalent about this.
So do you only cook for yourself, Angeliki? Like, are you your only customer, I guess? Maybe that's the key for her.
That's right.
I do have a diverse clientele only because I think part of the Mediterranean culture is to associate food with like a social activity and sharing it. So I quite frequently will cook for friends or family. To be honest, this is why I don't do it as often. If I'm going to do it, I know I'm going to devote myself to it, and I'd rather do it in big portions for a group. So when I do it, I do tend to do it for like the friends and family who are feeling also adventurous. Don't get me wrong, I do have some recipes that, I'll follow that, maybe created and people love, but there's the occasional, spicy take to it.
You got started in the community, though, not at an in-person event. So tell us a little bit about your journey as we foray into the technical side of what it is that we're so passionate about in the community that we love.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. So it all started during the pandemic when we still had lockdown. So that was early 2021. I got involved with a colleague of mine in a previous role. He was part of this virtual community called the Badgers, and it was a lot of the Microsoft community people had come together. I think everyone was feeling that void that the in-person community events leave, but also all the social interaction. So there was this virtual community between WhatsApp and then weekly calls and virtual pubs. So I got slightly introduced to it. And in the beginning, I felt like a fish out of water because, not going to lie, I want to say 99%, but it was probably 100% of people were, super technical, some version of solution architects and developers. And I thought, wow, this is like a lot of really smart technical people. What am I doing here again? But it was all in good spirit, and the welcome was really warm. And eventually, when things kicked off again, I joined my first event in South Coast Summit, which was in the UK back in 2021. And to be honest, I was instantly blown away. Like the energy, the passion to share, to learn, to come together, and just to bring all sorts of aspects of the products and the stack, as well as personal journeys into the equation. I was literally captivated to the point where, and at the time I was very good friends, and I had a mentor, Luke Rutenboer, who's now is one of the program managers for the Azure Service Bus. And he very much saw my passion, even though I was a little bit hesitant at the time, and thought, okay, let's see what story you can say and how you could be involved in the community. So he helped me put together my first session abstract, and it all kicked off from there. Obviously, that was back between like October and November, and it took a few months to get into it. So I started speaking in May last year, but as someone recently put it, I literally burst into the scene, having never spoken before, having never been actively in the community. I started with 3 sessions in May, and then it kind of like went crazy from there in a very good way. And the thing that I observed early on, which I developed as my niche, was the fact that everyone was super passionate about the technical side of the community, even though, yes, it is a technical community. I didn't feel there was enough people talking about who are we building for? What impact are we trying to have? Why are we doing what we're doing in terms of choosing specific solutions? And this is how I eventually developed my kind of tagline, which is built for real user needs, not senior egos, which is what I've personally felt in many projects that the implementations are for. So that's kind of how it all started. And then, building about how to drive the right user experiences in business applications, how to build with Fusion teams, and how to really champion customers. So all these subjects came together with the foundational methodology of change management, and it kicked off from there. And it's been well received, and it just blows my mind to this day how many people are interested in hearing about the human aspect of technology and how they can incorporate in their own projects.
I think that's an amazing area of focus, where there's definitely lots of opportunities to amplify. Because I can't tell you how many projects I've been part of outside of Microsoft, just for legal reasons, but how many projects I've been part of where I would ask the team, "Hey, who are we building this for?" Right? You've got all sorts of features you want to talk about, but who are the users of the system? And like, we don't know. Understanding who you're building it for and what goals they have is extremely important.
Even in the era of Copilot, I've been meaning to ask everyone, okay, but who is the pilot? Who are you being a co-pilot to? Right? So this is very important. And I think we can easily get caught up into the technology, but not think about who we're trying to impact.
I wanted to kind of bring it back to your passion for user experience and change management, because you mentioned that you come from a diverse background, and sometimes finding your place in the community where there's lots of other experts who are maybe more technically focused, right, might be difficult, and it might be hard for you to say, well, do I have a place here? Can I speak up? But you totally leaned into your passion, right? You saw something that people were not talking about, and you started helping other people care about this. Do you mind talking about that journey a little bit?
Of course, of course. Listen, we're all human. I've had imposter syndrome since day one, and to this day, I still get it. I don't think I'll ever transcend. I'll let you know if I do. But it's so in the beginning, it was very, very much like, oh my God, there's like this insanely smart people out here. What do I have to really talk about with them? It's twofold. First of all, it's absolutely quintessential to have someone who will mentor you into it. Helping you with imposter syndrome is part of it, but helping you visualize your story and how you want to approach it based on their experience as well is very important. Even from a logistics perspective, approaching, the whole like session submission and the call for speakers process, that also is important. But it's also about starting with just observing. So I didn't get in straight away and be like, hey, everyone, now you're going to listen to me. No introduction, just listen. No, that's not how it works. And it starts with observing what the content is, what the community is, observe what people are talking about, how, it's very behavioral. I think because I come from an economics background, which is pretty much behavioral science, I'm quite used to observing people and almost looking at it from a strategic perspective. To kind of generally understand how to approach things. So that being said, after that, it's about truly digging into what you're passionate about, being involved in the community, especially to the extent that I either do it or other colleagues do it. It requires a passion. You need to make it fun in your own way. So I was very clear with myself that if I'm going to approach this, no matter the challenges, imposter syndrome included, I'm going to do it in a way that is fun. So I'm going to do it in my own terms. Very quickly, I think you need to come to terms with the fact you're unique. Everyone is. So no matter what, you'll always have a different approach. So come to terms with it, then find ways in which you will genuinely make a difference by finding your niche, but also make it fun. So what I mean in practice, as an example, I'm a self-proclaimed geek and not just on data. I love puns. So guess what? Most of my sessions are movie themed of some sort, and that really makes it fun.
Noticed, yeah.
I'm here.
We're gonna have some Avengers action. Scottish Summit coming up in a few months. I'm doing a new Star Wars session. Like, this is really attracting people. Let me tell you, someone recently mentioned that actually. It's like, we can't compete, like just the abstract on its own,
Yeah, no, I love that, by the way. I had Princess Bride themed, He-Man and She-Ra, Transformers. Yeah, it engages people right away, right? And then, like you said, you can set that as a theme. It makes it fun, and now you're relating more to your audience.
Exactly. So putting that aside, I love PowerPoint, but making it super engaging. So it's not death by PowerPoint, but it actually becomes a bit of a story. So think of yourself as something between a show person and a storyteller. So that makes it really engaging. You really get to interact with your audience, and you become part of that story. So yes, it was hard, and even finding the right material. But especially because I'm very well aware that change management is not as popular of a topic in the industry. Mm-hmm. So we need to start a conversation. So I realized that there's no point in me approaching it in a very kind of straightforward way by saying, let me talk to you about change management. No, you need to build those foundations. And to start the conversation, I needed to approach it differently. So I would also say that it's important to find a creative way of approaching your subject, because, even within the products, there's been so many technical demos on the same product. I'm sure everyone feels the pressure to approach it in a creative way. So that also helps with surpass a little bit of that imposter syndrome by finding your own creative niche into it.
And I think we should talk about change management a little bit and the importance of it, because you could be building the most amazing solution that has all the features known to man. If there's no incentive for people to adopt this new solution, if there's no, if you don't consider the impact that it's going to have for them to learn, it's not going to happen. And that's people tend to dismiss that. I'd love to hear more some of the tips that you have to help with change management.
Of course, of course. And I'm really glad you mentioned that, because to be honest, this is one of the reasons why I went into change management, and one of the reasons why I went into the community in such an active capacity. So my background, even though I started with an economics degree, I went into digital marketing, the bookmaking industry, because I was very fascinated about behavioral science. And I thought, what better way to market in a scene of absolute risk and absolute chance? So that was quite fascinating. But that got me into CRM straight away. Without realizing it, there I am, 22 years old, handling in-house CRM systems, configuring, setting up, marketing strategies. So it's such a steep learning curve, but it kind of made me, grow this massive passion around it, because I saw the power of it. And at the same time, I saw how terrible implementations are. So consistently, I've worked with both in-house solutions and major cloud stacks as well, within and outside of Microsoft. And many times I've seen it was badly implemented. For a long time, I was the end user. And for a long time, I never had a voice. I never was able to give feedback that would make any difference. So I thought, after doing this consistently and observing this and bearing the consequences, I realized there must be something better, right? I have all this experience. So I've worked with so many different CRM systems. Surely there's something better to do. And that's how I went into change management, eventually transitioning from marketing, because I felt like I had such a holistic view of what CRM should be about, that I thought, okay, let me champion the user, because I've been the user. I know exactly what the problems are. So in terms of tips, we could go into a long conversation and I'm sure the Italian in me would come out. But I think to begin with is really sit down and listen, actively listen. So understand not only who you're building, what's their role, what is their day-to-day looking like, but also what are their pain points, and to harness them into feedback that you can put into the application. After doing that, which is part of what we do in change management, we call it the change impact assessment, and our profile personas, where we're literally profiling different roles and individuals to understand, their day-to-day, day in the life, if you may, what are the biggest pain points, as well as what they're wishing to get out of the application. Because let's be honest, people don't get up in the day saying, oh my God, I get to use the CRM system again. Hooray. No, they just want to get the job done, get out, right? So how do we make their job smoother, faster, easier, more productive? These are the things that you want to hear about when you're profiling them. And then to also understand, based on what you're trying to implement, what the delta is between, obviously, the as is and the to be state. So these are very important things. But also, it's about making the application work for them. So what I found in practice many times is that you have these amazing technical minds coming together, pitching, solutions left, right, and center to make it extra jazzy. And then in the implementation, it failed because you didn't consider, for example, that the messaging is so out of sorts. You have hard-coded error messages that make no sense, that no one can read them, because you never provided any proper messaging for it, or the business process flow keeps getting locked and no one knows why. So they just give up and go back to monitoring things in Excel offline. So all these things I wanted to bring together to say, okay, user experience, design with your solution architect. So what I found works really well, which is not just for Fusion teams, but generally championing from a user experience perspective, the design is going from the beginning with the solution architects and the development team to design the user journeys from a best practices perspective. Because if you do that, then the system will naturally be desired and adopted. Then change management, it just becomes organic, and you're not looking at it as a separate stage, as a nice to have, and all this, unfortunate misconceptions around being just a comms and training activity. So designing the user experience from within in a way that is so accessible and so usable. I think the accessibility principles, the 4 principles around being robust, understandable, perceivable, and so forth. This, champion it day to day. So make your fields understandable, make your user errors understandable. Don't lock fields and flows if you can avoid it, or lock them if you don't want to give people access to certain things. Use your security roles appropriately. So many tips, but ultimately work with the people that have access to your end users. So change managers do, because we have this change champions network. But if you don't speak to people and you just build on their behalf without giving them and empowering that voice, then how are you going to make a difference in what they do day to day?
David hears me say this all the time. So David, feel free to have a nap right now. But we talk about communicating, right? And to communicate is to, I've been told once that to communicate is to convey a message that results in a change in behavior. So if you're not getting the change in behavior you want, you're not communicating, you're just making noise. But that means you need to understand your audience. You need to understand, where they're at and where you need them to go to. And it's definitely the same thing that you're describing here when it comes to change management, but also user experience, right? And do you mind talking about the difference between UX and UI? Because you talk about user experience, and sometimes I think people confuse that with UI or user interface.
Of course. I mean, they're definitely used interchangeably, but one is a bit deeper than the other. When we're talking about UI, it's literally about what's tangible and right in front of us. But in terms of interacting with it and the overall journey that you go through, that's pretty much user experience. And this is why we have fantastic individuals in the community that really focus on that. But I think what's even more important, not only is understand the difference, but why we even have to differentiate them, because sometimes we want things to look pretty, and that's great. Like we want the most amazing neon background because it really stands out, or we want those flashy buttons and those cursor delays. And that might be looking great from a UI perspective. But this is when the UX fails, because have you thought about how accessible it is for someone with an impairment, or someone who has really bad Wi-Fi? Because that's also an impairment, but it's temporary and it's a different kind in terms of connectivity. So this is why we need to separate them, because sometimes you start with the best intentions on one, and then you move on to the other and absolutely fail because you didn't understand your audience. And sometimes you didn't realize that your audience is much wider. So this is one of the ways that the community has really opened up my eyes, is what accessibility means. And this is why I've been following closely what the developments on the sector are, because, I've always been in the digital space. And unfortunately, when you're handling digital products, you could be excluding so many people, and they could be making all the wrong decisions, whether financial or operational in any way as a result. So thinking about, as you said, who you're building for, what the audience is also about anticipating the fact that while you might be building for the majority, that does not mean you should be excluding the minority. So everyone should be, accessing your services and your products in an inclusive manner.
People think about accessibility and they're like, we'll get to it when we get to it. We don't really have to worry about it. But the thing that I don't think people understand is, if you're not considering accessibility, you're excluding statistically, what is it, 15% of the worldwide population, right? So if you're looking at ways to increase the number of people that use your application and making them successful, you can get a 15% increase by just making the application more accessible. I've noticed like a pattern here. So you're talking about communication, you're talking about change management, user experience, and accessibility. They all require you to have empathy. Is that one of your superpowers?
I would say I'm an empath, yes. I think it comes hand in hand with like being an active listener and observing. There's a lot of power in being silent and just observing and listening and really paying attention to everything around you. So in a way, yes, I would say it's a superpower because in my line of work, and I'm not just speaking about change management, I think being a technologist who really focuses on the human impact of technology, I would not be able to otherwise. I don't think it goes hand in hand. It would not work otherwise. And I'm hoping more and more people realize the power that it has when we're delivering solutions, being very empathetic when it comes to doing so.
Empathy to me is one of the most important qualities just in being human. And then when you are able to dial it in to something as focused as this, I think it's for a lot of people, they don't realize how valuable it really is when you start doing technology and developing software and stuff like that. But it really is, to Hugo's point, a very huge superpower. So it's very, very cool.
This is one of the reasons why change management is so important, because we are part of this empowerment and this enablement. So in one of the most frequent examples of citizen development, where you're democratizing IT, obviously in the era of Gen AI and all the lovely Copilot products, we are trying to bring everyone together. This is why we're trying to enable them, and these ecosystems should not be a scary conversation about, governance and CEO kits. It's all about how do we enable the people to, be excited about being accountable and driving their own technology. This is how you mentioned, for example, identifying with the Wendy's and the Nancy's. Once they realize we can empower them with tools, they can transcend those, some of the blockers that they had within the business, where they didn't feel like they were enabled to make a difference in their role with the solutions provided. Now we're suddenly thinking these almost become the Wendy's and the Nancy's of the world, now gain these superpowers, and by enabling them, having, as you said, the communication, the right message to do something different. What is different in us? We're helping them own their own journey, own the way they operate. And that is how you gain, supporters in the mission, how digital transformation becomes a viral movement.
So before we wrap up, you are going to be presenting at MPPC, or Microsoft Power Platform Conference, coming up in October in Las Vegas. Are you excited for that?
I am super excited. Both abstracts are brand new. I've only had a run of one so far, and it's really exciting because I'm looking at the principles of working with developers within the Dynamics world, and the whole DevOps side of how do you enable those collaborations and the application development lifecycle, but also just looking at how important it is in the low-code solution environments to really champion the change management process by making that difference. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, awesome. It's going to be a great show. Well, Angeliki, thank you for taking some time out of your day and spending it with us here today on the show and letting the community get to know you a little bit more. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
All right, everybody. Well, it's that time of the show again where we're going to highlight the amazing articles, blogs, and videos and samples that you've been creating over the past couple weeks. Now, if you would like us to include it in the future episodes, just remember to tag it on Twitter and LinkedIn with what hashtag? That hashtag. I got it right. No, that one. There we go. Power Platform Connects, and we will include it and highlight it. Hugo, what do you got for us this week?
We have lots of great new posts that people have tagged with Power Platform Connects, and so let's go through them. Our first post today is by Dion Taylor, and she talks about Dynamics 365 customer service, spice up your case forms with new controls. So Dion talks about some of the new components that came out as part of the 2023 release wave 1. One of the new controls is called the recent records control, which allows you, as the name says, to view recent records. Dion also shares a way to actually use a new JavaScript that allows you to show the customer details in the side pane. And then she goes through various configurations on how to add that customer details in the side pane. And that's very useful because if you want to have information about a customer inside of a case form, but you don't want the information to always be there. You want the information to be at a fingertip. You can actually do that using the article that is described here. And of course, Dion always adds videos at the end of her post, so that's a great place to go take a look at. You don't have to wait for the movie. You can just go read and watch the movie at the same time. Our next post is by Lindsay Shelton. So Lindsay here talks about how to block downloads with Stream on SharePoint. If you have not been made aware of this in a while, recently, or maybe not so recently, Microsoft changed from storing videos that are recorded in stream to move it into SharePoint. And there's lots of great reasons why this would happen. But of course, it introduced a few issues, or not a few issues, but a few opportunities, I think, that people have challenges with. And one of the challenges is, well, what if I want to prevent people from downloading the videos? Because it used to be a lot easier in Stream, but now that videos are stored in SharePoint, it's so much easier for people to download them. So Lindsay looked at an article from John Moore, who is mentioned here, and John has an answer to this. And the short answer is basically use restricted view permissions. That way you can restrict what people can do when they get to see the videos. So it's not a Power app or Power Automate feature per se, but it's definitely, if you combine this functionality with some of your automation, you can do some really cool stuff with your new videos. Next, we have John Russell, who's talking about application lifecycle management for the Power Platform using Azure DevOps. So John is taking some time off from the UK heat to talk about Azure DevOps and build and release your Power Platform solutions. Now he's actually mentioning an article from Sami Hassan, and it's basically, the idea here is that if you use a solid Power Platform environment, what John says, and I tend to agree with him, is that you should, at the minimum, have a development, user acceptance testing, and production environment. I would even add that you should probably have a QA environment as well, or a potentially staging environment that's a copy of your UAT for additional testing by other teams. Now, the problem is if you're manually copying things, or if you're, even worse, if you're reproducing things by hand, copying and pasting, it leads to probably some challenges. So John has an extensive list. It's actually a very long article and very well written article that gives you all the steps that you need to do to move your environment using Azure DevOps. And there's also a bonus YouTube video in the article as well. So if you are looking into getting started with Azure DevOps and application lifecycle management using Power Platform, it's definitely a great article. Our next article is by Craig White, who talks about a faster way to add comments to your Power Effects. If you have not done so yet, you should definitely try adding comments to your Power Effects code. Of course, if it's just a one-liner, you probably don't need to add comments, but the more your code starts getting lengthy, the more lines you have, the more it makes sense for you to add some comments in your code, just to explain to others what your intention was. And trust me, in 6 months from now, when you look at your code again, you might even help yourself by discussing or commenting to yourself what you were planning on doing a long time ago. So again, it's important to document your logic. You want to help others, and it's generally considered a good developer practice to add comments in your code, and low code is no different. Now,
is that where you say, allow myself to remind myself of this?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. What Craig is actually showing is, as he says, a cheeky hack. What he's using is using AutoHotkey. AutoHotkey is an add-on that you can run, that you can bind to keys or hotkeys, and it will run some script when you execute. And what Craig does is he actually adds some comment and inserts the date and time and his name, and then adds some extra fancy lines in the code as a comment. So it makes your comments really easy to see. Go take a look at it. It's a great script that he's using here. And if you haven't looked into it, go take a look at AutoHotkey as well. It's a great add-on. I use it all the time. David Rivard has a way to generate Dataverse early bound classes using the Power App CLI Model Builder. The Model Builder allows you to create classes for your C# code that contains the names of your tables and the columns of your tables. And then because those classes are predefined, you can actually use them in your code in something that's called early bound classes. Now, the cool thing about early bound classes is it prevents you from creating typos when you're writing your code because it auto completes, your column names and things like that. However, you need to use special tools to generate that model, those early bound classes, using the model builder and a Power App CLI. If you don't have permission on your desktop, because some organizations don't always give developers permission to run all the tools they need, or if you want people to generate those early bound consistently, or if you want to make sure that you're always reusing the same approach across all your projects, one of the smart ways to do this is to actually uses a Azure DevOps pipeline to call the Power App CLI model builder. And that's what David does in his article. He makes it sound way easier than I did. I strongly recommend you go read his article. Natalie Linders has been collecting a series of terms that she puts in her glossary for the Power Platform. And so this has been great. She's been building this and she's looking for feedback. She's asking people, what are some of the keywords that you would like to see in her glossary? And she's open to any additions or comments. It's definitely a great thing here because I know I struggle with acronyms. The glossary is a great way to figure out what are these new terms when you're getting started in the Power Platform ecosystem. Good job, Natalie. Craig White, I've seen this guy before, also talks about entity relationship diagrams. Now, technically, entity relationship diagrams are not something that is specific to the Power Platform. It's definitely a great tool to use when you want to understand and design kind of your relational database systems. And one way you're doing this is by you're visually showing your data tables and their relationship. And then it makes it easy for you to really understand how your solution is built. All the data components in your solution are built because you can see the tables and the columns and how they connect to each other. Craig's article is a great article. He goes in great details on how to create entity relationship diagrams, and what is their relevance in the Power Platform development. Even if you think that you're like, I'm not a database administrator, I'm not a database designer, you might benefit from understanding how to use entity relationship diagrams, and they certainly will help you document and communicate. Document for the future and communicate with others how your solution is built. Reshmi has an article called Display Instagram Posts into SharePoint using Instagram Basic Display Independent Publisher Connector. Try to say that 3 times fast. It's actually a post on the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform community blog. And so Reshmi has been working with the Instagram Basic Display Connector in Power Apps and Power Automate, and she shows how to use the basic Instagram Basic Display Independent Publisher Connector to do things like getting details, getting my media, getting details about my media, and then how to store that information in SharePoint libraries, for example. And she does show some examples of using view formatting, list formatting to actually do some really cool stuff, but using Power Platform and specifically Power Automate to actually integrate with that.
She did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say she did a really good job doing a demo of this on the community call a couple weeks ago. So if you're looking to see this live and in living color, then definitely check that out. You can do and see that at aka.ms/community/home and go check out those YouTube links. But well job, Reshmi. You did a great job on that demo.
And our next article is by Craig White. Wait a minute. Have you ever had deja vu? It feels like I've talked about this person before.
We need a horn, like a hockey horn for the hat trick for Craig. Woo!
That's right. Great job, Craig. So Craig has a third article this week, Power Platform Environment Variables. So what are Power Platform Environment Variables? Well, if you are moving your solutions between one environment to another, let's say you're moving stuff between your dev, testing, or QA and production environment, and maybe you have a UAT environment somewhere in there. And you have different um, elements that you need to configure between each environment. So for example, let's say that you have an email address that you want to use in your solution, and you want that email address to be different between each environment. Well, you could, in theory, go in and edit your code in each environment, but that's probably the worst thing to do because you're just invalidated all your testing. What if you just introduce the bug by editing your code? The other way to do that is to use environment variables. And environment variables allows you to say, well, this thing is going to be different in every environment. So in this case, this email address is going to be different in every environment. And when you import your solution, it'll actually prompt you to enter the email address or whatever other values that you're looking for. So he talks about the types of variables. He talks about where the information is stored. Then he talks about how to create an environment variable. It talks about the default values versus the current values. And then he talks about how you refer to variables in your solutions in Power Automate, Power Apps, and so on and so forth. So how do you use those variables in your code so that you don't have to ever touch your code when you're moving things between environments? And of course, he goes into specific details on how to use it in Power Apps and Power Automate. It is a great article. Craig never seems to be afraid of writing nice and comprehensive articles, and I certainly appreciate that. So go take a look at Craig's various articles that we mentioned this week.
And today I get the honor of introducing our final article of the day, written by a guy that I know pretty well. Hugo, tell us a little bit about this article.
Yes, we have exciting news coming from the Dynamics 365 community. On June 16th, we're going to go in maintenance mode. So the Dynamics 365 community will be read-only for the weekend. It will reemerge from its cocoon as a transformed new site. Now, here's a sneak preview. The new Dynamics 365 will sport a new look and feel, and guess what? It's actually built using the Power Platform, Dataverse, Dynamics, and Power Pages behind the scenes.
Woo! Woo!
Among other solutions. But yeah, it's very cool, very exciting, and I can't wait. This is just a start. I can't wait to see what else we can do and how quickly we can innovate using this new Dynamics 365 community platform. And that's it for me. Back to you, David.
Awesome. Well, we are so excited to have all that content to be shared with us. Now, if you want us to include your content on future episodes, remember, we absolutely want to as well. All you got to do is tag your tweets and your LinkedIn post with Power Platform Connects. It's like I do it on purpose. Power Platform Connects, and we'll scour the interwebs to get it included. Now, that's not the only thing you can do to get included and involved in the community. Hugo, what else?
Well, one of the things you can do is you can join our online Power Platform community by going to aka.ms/join the community. And there you can help answer questions. You can ask questions. Who knows, you might even become a super user who's recognized for their contribution in the community. We can't wait to see you there. Again, go to aka.ms/join the community.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Bye. Thank you. And the comments are going to be for the director's cut, where we're going to have the
halo.
This is awkward. I don't have anything ready for you.
I won't get it right when I say it.